Hello. I think we should be live now. As always, if you're already watching, please let me know in the chat that you can hear me. I always like to double check. And we'll wait just a minute before we get going. So feel free to say hello in the chat. It's always fun to hear from other people watching. Maybe put where you're watching from. And if you want to share a little bit more about what you're working on, like if you're building something with a large language model, that's always really cool to hear about as well. Let me just share my screen and get set up here. And I already see quite a few people. Maybe sometimes the number fluctuates when I first start the stream. But yeah, if anyone wants to say hello in the chat, let me know that you can hear me. That'd be great. And then we're going to wait just a minute here before we actually get started. While we're doing that, I'm just going to make sure that everything else seems to be working on my end. Looks like I see I'm live on YouTube and LinkedIn. Just going to make sure the email went out for everyone on Eventbrite. Yeah, if you're just joining in, we're going to get started here in a minute, but feel free to please introduce yourself in the chat and maybe tell me where you're watching from. I'm streaming from Seattle, Washington. And bonus points, I'm actually excited to travel to New York for the first time next week. For some reason, I've never been to New York. So if you happen to have any recommendations for New York, ping me or let me know as well in the chat. Someone said hello from Poland. Awesome. Hello. What time is it over in Poland? It's got to be pretty late, or is it not that late actually? But welcome. It's fun doing virtual events and getting people from everywhere. Someone said hello from Italy. Awesome. I would love to come visit Italy sometime soon. I have not been over there yet. I haven't been to Poland yet either. Italy is well, I don't know if it'll be the next place I go to, but it's up on my list. It's 7 p.m. in Poland. Okay, yeah, that's not too bad. Well, thank you for joining me in your evening time. And again, we'll get going here in just a minute. It looks like people are still joining in. Feel free to say hello in the chat. Maybe share where you're watching from. If you want to add a little bit more details about yourself, I'd always love hearing it, especially if you want to share about what you're working on around machine learning or LLMs. Maybe you're just learning. Maybe this will be your first app with OpenAI. That could be kind of fun as well. But yeah, if you want to share a little bit about what you've been working on, and or maybe what you want to build, do so in the chat. Someone said, I'm always welcome in Warsaw as well. It's a great place. I would love to go travel way more, and I'm hoping to do that in the next coming years. All right, so we'll wait just a few more seconds. We'll get going at 10:04 my time, and we'll start going through some slides. So just a heads up, there's going to be some slides, and then we're going to go into a Colab notebook, run some code. You're more than welcome to follow along with me. I definitely encourage it. Usually you'll have more fun probably and learn a lot from doing that. But also, if you don't want to run all the code or you don't have an OpenAI account or something right now, you're welcome to just watch as well. While we're waiting to actually start going through these slides, I'm going to share some links. If you're watching on YouTube, these links are also in the description below. So if you're coming back and watching the recording, you can find them in the description below. Or if you're watching right now and you want to open these up, they are also in that description below. But I'm going to copy them into the chat real quick as well. And then we'll get going through the slides. And then there won't be that long on slides. And then we'll go kind of see some hands-on examples here. So one, you'll want to have a WhyLabs account if you want to follow along the whole thing, where we're going to build a summarization app. We're going to evaluate some metrics with an open source library called LangKit, and then we're going to see how we can write those metrics to an AI observatory, which we're going to use WhyLabs in this case, and LangKit to extract those metrics. The account is free. There's no card or anything required on sign up, so it should just take a minute. I think you just have to verify your email, and then you should be good to go. The other account that I don't have a link here for is if you have an OpenAI account, we're going to be using the OpenAI API today. So you just want to have that so you can grab an API key later when we run our model. You can check out LangKit. I shared the GitHub link as well, and we always appreciate a star on our open source work. So if you go check it out, definitely give us a star. And then we're going to run code in that Colab notebook that I just shared, and I'll share it again when we get to the end of the slides. And then also, I will share a Slack group. This Slack group is going to be a good place to ask questions later. I won't see the questions you post in there during the workshop, but if you have questions about anything we covered today, or about your project later, about ML monitoring in general, or just want to keep up with AI resources, it's a fun community to join. Someone said, I need it. I think that was to me saying I want to travel more. And again, I see more people joined in. So we're going to get going through the slides. And then there's just a little bit of time on slides to catch everyone up with some of the concepts and talk about what we're going to be doing. And then we will go into code and run code and see things kind of hands-on. And again, you should follow along if you want, or you can always watch as well. But this is a workshop on creating and monitoring summarization apps. So we're going to be using the OpenAI API, like I mentioned before, and a open source library called LangKit that we maintain at WhyLabs. And then we're going to use the WhyLabs AI Observatory to look at metrics. And we'll see kind of what this all means, some of the theoretical stuff on slides, and then we'll go in and implement this in a Colab notebook. So, no matter your skill level, you should be able to take the notebook I'm going to give you and run the code and hopefully have a lot of fun going through this workshop. And again, maybe you've never built a summarization app. Let me know in the chat if you have had experience building summarization apps. It's always fun to hear about some of the experience of people watching as well. All right. Oh, and real quick, sorry, I gotta share the links one more time over in the LinkedIn stream because it didn't post over there. Just the ones that you need to follow along. I'll share the WhyLabs account and then the Colab notebook and the Slack channel. And then we really should be good to go here. Link it. All right. So today, a quick introduction about myself first. I'm Sage Elliott. I'm a machine learning and MLOps evangelist at WhyLabs. At WhyLabs, we build tools to enable AI observability and ML monitoring. And we'll see a little bit about this in a second. But typically that's to, discover issues faster or have better ways to evaluate your models, either in production or kind of before you deploy them, especially with large language models like we'll see today. But basically, we're on a mission to make AI better. And for over the last decade, I've worked as a software engineer or hardware engineer, mostly with agencies or startups in Seattle, Washington, and then also in Central Florida. And in general, I love making things with technology. If you want to stay connected with me, definitely do so either in that Slack channel or LinkedIn is going to be a really good place as well. So you can ask me questions there later, or if you just want to talk about anything else random in tech or Seattle coffee shops, or give me recommendations for New York places when I go visit there next week, you can ping me on LinkedIn. About you. So again, in the chat, feel free to say hello. It's way more fun, not only for me presenting, but I think other people in the chat too, to kind of see who is watching here. So again, say hello, maybe say where you're watching from. If you want to share a little bit more about yourself, please share like what you're building or what you're interested in building with large language models. What kind of stuff do you want to build? Even if you're not building it yet, like what is interesting to you in the field of large language models? That's always really fun to hear. And also, if you want to throw in there what type of models you would want to see in another workshop. So today we're going to be building a summarization app where it's going to take in, a chunk of text and then summarize it more concisely and give us a shorter response. What other type of applications would you want to see a workshop on next? So that could be like chatbots or building an agent, doing like a meeting summarization. There's so many interesting use cases here. Raymond said, good morning, missed the book club yesterday. We actually had to cancel it yesterday. I had to cancel it on my end, so you actually didn't miss anything. And then again, I'll share this link. So if you want to do an introduction that is a little bit more permanent, join the Slack channel here. And all right. So setup, again, I'll cover this when we get to the code part. And I just saw a few more people join. So again, these links on YouTube are in the description below. And the only thing you'll probably need to do is create that free WhyLabs account. Again, no card or anything required. Why can't I click this? It's already in the chat and in the description below. And then also an OpenAI account that I'll share this link. You may already have an account there of some type, probably. We're going to be using an API, so you will need access to an API key from OpenAI. I feel like my cursor is being a little weird. I'm going to switch the keyboard. All right, so building a summarization app with OpenAI. And this is kind of what we're going to do today. I made this little graphic here. So we're going to use the OpenAI API, like I mentioned. It's going to take a user prompt. In this case, the application is going to be for summarizing text. So we'll see some examples, but I also encourage you to just, find an example that you want to play with and see what happens with it today. I think it's more fun if you kind of bring in your own data. And we're going to input that to the API. We're also going to do a pretty simple, well, it's going to start out simple anyway, system prompt to tell OpenAI what we want to do. So in this case, we're going to tell it to summarize text, but you can get really specific with it, and we'll see this in action in a little bit. And we can collect telemetry from it, kind of see how it's performing on various metrics. So there's different things you could look for on summarization apps. And again, we'll see this in action, but it could be things like you want to make sure that you're not over a certain character count because maybe you want your summarizations to always be incredibly short. Maybe you want the readability score to be really high, so your summarizations maybe should be readable for almost any audience. Maybe it's taking in hard to read text, maybe really technical stuff, and you kind of want to bring it down and have it in a language that's easier for more people to understand. And these are all metrics that we can kind of track out of the box. And again, we'll see this in action. And then we can observe those metrics over time and actually see like if we change a system prompt or if a completely new type of user comes in and starts using, new data, how is our model behaving with that new data or that new system prompt? We can monitor those over time and make sure that our model is actually doing what it's supposed to do over time, but also we can improve it over time. So right now, a lot of people use system prompts to change the behavior of their LLMs. Like with OpenAI, you couldn't even fine tune on 3.5 until recently. I forget if you can do on 4 right now. So you're telling it, hey, summarize this text in this case. And then you're probably going to want to change that system prompt over time to make it better as you realize like how people are using your app. When I talk to a lot of people right now, I say, cool, you're changing it. How do you know it's better? A lot of times it's kind of like a shoulder shrug where they're like, well, I added more details to it. I think it's better. They probably test it on 1 or 2 examples that they input themselves, but you don't really see how it's performing in production over time. And that's what we're going to see today. So you could change the system prompt. You can actually do multiple API calls and have like 5 different system prompts and monitor all those at the same time, and then compare them to each other and then select the best prompt over time, which is pretty cool. And I think that's going to be kind of the future of prompt engineering. In my opinion, I mean, we'll see where this goes, but you're going to be making these changes, monitoring over time, but also potentially having multiple prompts out there as kind of shadow deployment where only one is really giving the user response back, but you can kind of see how the other prompts would be performing without actually passing user data to the user. So just AI observability at a high level looks something like this. Again, we'll see this in action. We'd have your pipeline. Today, it's just our OpenAI model, but if you're actually putting something in production, you probably have a whole MLOps or data pipeline where you're doing your serving and retraining, etc. In that pipeline, you're going to be extracting some sort of telemetry. In this case, it's from the prompt and response for a large language model. The way we work at WhyLabs and with LangKit, the data extracted here is privacy preserving, so it doesn't actually contain your raw data. It just creates summary statistics. And again, we'll see this in action, but it is things like sentiment or reading level, etc., that gets extracted with LangKit. Those are some out-of-the-box metrics, but you can also easily add custom metrics in here. So this is on your environment, in your Python environment. You're extracting these metrics. No raw data leaves that environment. Then you're going to be passing just those extracted metrics, so no raw data. You can pass that to an observability platform. In this case, we'll be using WhyLabs. And then so you don't have to worry about any raw data moving out of your production environment. This is key, for a lot of industries like this, but really key for specific industries like healthcare or the financial sector, where they cannot or they won't move raw data out of their on-prem environments, but they're okay moving summary statistics out. So if it was tabular data, you could think of those statistics as like the min, the max, the mean. And again, we'll see what this looks like in action for language metrics. And then inside the observability platform, you can do things like, look at all your data. You can get reports and dashboards. You could set up alerts and notifications. So if something drastically changes, set an alert or trigger a workflow. So you can actually have like annotators annotate new data and then retrain a model, kind of all automatically happen when it detects something like data drift. And today we're just going to be kind of looking at more evaluation metrics. But actually tomorrow, I'll share a link in a little bit, but tomorrow we're doing another workshop focused on more security metrics and actually setting things up like guardrails and alerts on more like security focused metrics. So today we're going to mostly be looking at kind of evaluation metrics here. So what is ML monitoring and AI observability? So we saw it at a high level here. It's pretty common to monitor model inputs and model outputs. So today that would actually just be the prompt coming into your model and the response out of your model. But you could have a bigger pipeline where you may be doing data cleaning earlier on. I'm not sure if that's a super popular use case with prompts in this case, but you could be adding monitoring basically anywhere in your pipeline for data quality or schema issues. Data drift happens a lot where the data going into your model no longer really matches the distribution of the training data set is a common issue. So for large language models, it actually could be like if you're always expecting a certain group of users to talk a certain way, and then now you have a new generation and they have different slang words and your model isn't understanding as well, you could potentially be monitoring like new data to a corpus of pre-existing data and say, oh, there's like new words and stuff in here. People are using the model differently. And we have a saying, bad data happens to good models. You can evaluate all you want before you put it in production. Once you put it in production, chances are you're going to see some interesting things happen and interesting data that comes into your model. But you can also monitor not just for data quality issues or data drift things, but evaluation metrics. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at some language metrics, and we're actually just going to use that to improve our model potentially instead of just monitoring for things like data drift. These are all things you can do and should do. And again, like I was mentioning, tomorrow we're doing another workshop more focused on security metrics for your models. And we'll kind of get a taste of what that might look like today because we'll see some of those metrics. But we'll be focusing more on how we can monitor our summarization app today and potentially improve it. So tying this back to large language models, you're probably already familiar with them at this point. You probably use at least ChatGPT, if not other models. We're going to be looking at summarization specifically today, but some of the other use cases that you could use similar things like we're going to use today is agents, chatbots, and Q&A, etc. And again, if you have a type of model or application that you want to see a workshop on next, please let me know in the chat. And I saw someone said they're watching from the Netherlands and they're doing conversational chat agents in specified domains, medical for US, but we'll also use it for clustering and radiology reports. Ooh, that sounds really cool and interesting. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's awesome seeing, where, just machine learning in general is being used. But I think the healthcare sector and is, super interesting. Some of the common pain points with LLMs. You have hallucinations where it's giving irrelevant or inaccurate responses. Prompt engineering, this is what we're going to see more of today, where you're telling your model how to behave, and it's hard to kind of track these changes over time. And it is currently right now probably the main driver of most LLM behavior that you're using. And then we're going to be looking at how we could also potentially look at output validation. Again, we'll see this more in the workshop tomorrow, but we'll see a little bit of it today too. We're extracting metrics and you could look at responses. And with those responses, you could do things like, is there PII in here? Or is my model behaving, like does it have a really negative sentiment? Maybe I want to tweak it. So how to solve these at scale? We can set up guardrails. So extracting metrics, like we'll see here in a second, we could say, if they meet a certain threshold, like if there's a big probability that this looks like a jailbreak. We could, not pass that prompt to the model, or pass the prompt to the model, but not give the response back to the user. We can make sure that responses and prompts coming into our model belong in the category that the model was created for. So if we're building a summarization app today and people are trying to ask it for medical advice or something like that, maybe we don't want our model to do that. Or if you have like a tax chatbot and people are asking it for weird stuff, maybe you don't want to do that. And then again, security is a big thing that comes up, where people want to make sure that no PII or any information is coming out of models. And a story I always tell is I was building a little chatbot for a online store and pretending to be an angry customer. And then the model gave back a phone number, but I never told it to give a phone number. So it just made up a phone number. And I actually found that because I had general observability set up. So it wasn't a guardrail that I had in place at the time, but it said, hey, a pattern matched a phone number. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I never told it to give a phone number. And then I found out this made up phone number that my model was giving. So using just kind of general observability, where I can look at all these stats around my LLM, both on the user side and on the response side, I was able to then go set up a guardrail. So the observability side is really good to kind of keep an eye on, and then kind of allows you to get information of how you should adjust your evaluation metrics and your guardrails. So solving at scale, LangKit looks something like this. You have your prompts coming in to really any large language model. LangKit's really easy to install in any Python environment. We have our prompts or response. We're going to extract metrics from the prompts and responses. You could also just do one if you wanted to. With that, you can do things like discern quality and sentiment. Again, we'll see this in action very soon here. And you can enforce things for like response quality, PII leakage, and evaluation, like we'll be looking at today. And LangKit is open source. It has integrations, but most of the time you probably won't even need an official integration. It's really easy to integrate with almost any model or large language model that I've used. As long as you can get the prompt and response in like a dictionary format or a data frame, you can extract metrics with LangKit for it. And it's extendable, so we'll see out of the box metrics here, but you can add your own custom metrics really easy. Just import a couple things from our open source library and really just make a decorator on a function, and then you can start extracting metrics out whatever that function returns. And I'll link to some resources for that later as well. But out of the box, we have metrics like response relevancy, has patterns. So has patterns by default. It looks for things like credit card numbers, phone numbers, social security number. I feel like I might be missing one, but some common kind of PII type of information that you might not want coming out of your model, or maybe even going into your model. That's a big deal too, security with information going in sometimes. And then sentiment, toxicity, jailbreak similarity, categories, difficult words, reading score, and more. And again, we'll see all of these in action here in just a few minutes, but LangKit works like this. Prompt comes in, we extract metrics out of it, response comes in, and then we extract metrics out of it as well. And then we can do things like evaluate our model performance, monitor over time, or even set guardrails up on these specific metrics. Again, we'll actually run code here in just a few minutes, but just to show an example, it's really easy to use. You just import LangKit or LLM metrics from LangKit, and then WhyLabs as Y, which WhyLabs is our other open source library that LangKit is built on. So if you're using other data that isn't language based, like tabular data or computer vision, you can use WhyLabs to log metrics. And then we're going to initialize a language schema. So by default, it's going to be out of all those out of the box metrics that we just saw. And then this line here in the middle, this is actually us just using LangKit with WhyLabs, where we're passing in a prompt and response that's in a dictionary format with prompt and response as the keys, passing in the language schema here. And then it's going to create a profile that has all these metrics in it. And we can use those metrics to monitor over time. So this is a little screenshot from WhyLabs. And in WhyLabs, it'll also automatically detect interesting things going on. It will give you kind of some insights about the data that was uploaded. And again, we'll see this in action here very soon. But you're able to log this data, in this time series view. And then you can also set up monitors. So if something does go wrong, like a big shift happens, you can get an alert on it. Or you can just use this to kind of eyeball and evaluate your models. So enough slides. Let's go ahead and see all these things we talked about in action. So again, if you want to follow along, you can just create this account. Again, it should just take a minute. There's no card or anything required. I think it's just email validation. And then this is going to be the Colab notebook that we're going to be running. And again, they are also in the description below. So if you're watching the recording later, you can go click on that below. And then also, you don't need this for the workshop, but if you want to get a promo code for the enterprise version of WhyLabs, which has a lot of other neat features like monitoring on smaller batches of data, so you can get alerts hourly versus daily, which is the default. And again, we'll see this in action here in a second. You can fill out this form. Again, not required for the workshop here, but if you want more enterprise features like adding team members, adding more projects, and having smaller batches to run monitoring on, you can fill out that form below. Once you open up the Colab notebook, you should have something like this. And I would love it if one person in the chat can let me know that they were able to open this up, because it's my first time running this workshop. And occasionally there's some sort of, sharing issue and you won't be able to open it, but it should be good. I double checked it, but I want to triple check it by asking the chat, can you open up this Colab notebook? Someone said it works. Awesome. Thank you so much for letting me know. I have some other links in here too. So if you want to dive deeper into the models and stuff that extract all these metrics, feel free to click these links. Again, the project is open source, so you can actually go look at all the models and stuff behind the scenes and even adjust and add your own. And I didn't update this part. This is actually a lie. We're going to be using the OpenAI model, but we still don't have to run with a GPU time. So I'm actually going to delete this right now before I forget next time. All right, so what you should do is I recommend going to File, Save a Copy and Drive. This is going to create your very own copy of this. So don't worry about messing it up. In fact, I definitely encourage you to mess around with any of the code, or specifically like the prompts coming in, or get your own text coming in. So we're going to be summarizing text. So if you want to think about what you want to summarize, that could be like your favorite movie plot. You can go find on Wikipedia or IMDb, put it in and kind of see what happens. This is going to be set up so it's interactive and you can actually take your own data pretty easily and see what happens here. All right, so save a copy and drive. You can go bookmark the original link if you want. So again, don't worry about breaking this. You can always go back to the original link. For part of this here shortly, you're going to want to have that free WhyLabs account as well as the OpenAI account to get our API keys. And if you want to check out LangKit and WhyLogs, the links are here, as well as the Slack channel for asking questions later. This is a code cell. So if you haven't used Jupyter Notebook before or Google Colab, Google Colab is basically Google's way of hosting a Jupyter Notebook. And a Jupyter Notebook allows us to write code, documentation, and see visualizations kind of all in one place. It's a really great tool. If we hit run on this first code cell, it'll take a few seconds to spin up a little instance here. And we see hello world when we run this first code cell. And you can also run code cells by hitting shift enter on it. And you'll probably see me doing that a lot on the workshop here. So let's go ahead and run this code cell, which is going to pip install the libraries we're going to be using today: OpenAI, Gradio, LangKit. And by default, Google Colab comes pre-installed with a lot of libraries like TensorFlow, PyTorch, etc. But we're going to install a couple they don't have today. Getting a couple pip errors here, so we'll see what happens. Because sometimes Colab's a little weird installing stuff. I think someone even mentioned they're getting pip errors. Let me see what happens when we're done here. And occasionally, Gradio behaves weird. So Gradio is a neat little tool that allows us to create kind of a interface to interact with language models, or really machine learning in general, very quickly. We're going to see it with LLMs today. Sometimes Colab can be a little weird with installing some packages because it has other packages pre-installed. And sometimes there's like conflicting things. And especially with Gradio, Gradio always works great when I use it locally. Sometimes it's a little bit weird in Google Colab, but don't worry. If we do have an error, I already have a backup plan for it. And there's actually a code cell towards the end of the notebook where we can skip the Gradio part and actually just run this other cell. And it's not quite as cool, but it still totally works. So we got a couple errors there. Let's ignore them and see if everything works. So if we can import everything here, it probably will work. Occasionally, like if there's an error on importing Gradio, that's the only thing I've seen recently that could happen. So we're importing OpenAI, OS, datetime, Gradio, WhyLabs, and LangKit. This is, I think, a new feature in Google Colab where probably because we're using Gradio, and what it does is it creates a little widget inside our notebook that we can interact with. This is a new thing. So it's saying we can enable our third-party widgets. I'm going to ignore this for now. We might have to come back to this if Gradio doesn't work. This might be a new way to always make it work. I'm going to ignore it, and let's see what happens. So everything imported, and then we're just setting our pandas data frame to display all the columns. Again, we'll see here why in a second. So now I want to set up my authentication and project keys. So I'm going to go to my OpenAI account, and I'll create a new key here. So I'll just call this Some App Workshop. You call it whatever you want. Again, this is the part where you do need an OpenAI account if you want to actually follow along with everything right now. Otherwise, feel free to continue watching, and we'll kind of see what we're doing. And you can always come back to this notebook when you create an account. So I'm going to create a key here. I'll copy this over, go back to my copy of the notebook, paste in my OpenAI key here. Now I'm going to get some data from WhyLabs here. So if you created a free WhyLabs account and you're on the homepage of the app, you should have something that looks a little bit like this. You'll have different projects in here. I think that it starts with 2 toy projects when you first sign up. What I'm going to do is hit Create Resource. So you should be able to do this as well. This will take us to this model and dataset management page. I'm over the amount of free models I can have here on a free account. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Edit Models and Dataset, and I'm going to delete one here. And I don't think you'll have to delete one if you have a new account, but if you do need to free up a model, you can do so by hitting Edit and then Delete. I'm going to create a new model now. I'll call this Some App Workshop as well. Again, you can call it whatever you want. Resource type here, I'm going to select a large language model. This is just going to kind of change the way that we view our data in WhyLabs and give us some specific features around large language models. Again, the default batch frequency is every day, so we'll see what this looks like. We're going to be uploading profiles, and then those will be kind of batched into daily batches. But if you have the enterprise version, you could do hourly as well. And now I have my new model. It's this one, model 304. Your model number will probably be, I think it's like 2 or something like that. But I've created quite a few models on this account. So now I'm going to copy that number over, model 304, set that up as my model ID, and make sure you don't accidentally copy over any new lines or spaces here. So I just want it to be a string. I'm going to go get my WhyLabs API key now. So again, back in WhyLabs, going to this tab here from the same page. I'm going to create a new API key. Again, I'll call this Some App Workshop. I spelled that. Create token. I'm going to grab my token here, and then I'll paste it in this little placeholder. Again, make sure you don't have any new line characters or spaces that you accidentally get. And then actually our org ID is at the bottom or at the end here, but you can also always get it in WhyLabs over here. You can copy the org ID here or here as well. I'm going to copy it in now and place it in this org ID spot here. And actually, I'd have to double check because I know we are updating WhyLogs where you might be able to just set the API key without this top part. So that actually might work if you just run this without this now. But we're going to run it this way just to make sure. So I'm going to run this code cell. And now I've set up my OpenAI key as well as my WhyLabs project. The next cell, we're going to define our summarization app. How it works, we're gonna be using GPT 3.5 Turbo, but I'm gonna pause for a second. If anyone needs me to go over anything about getting those access tokens from WhyLabs again, I'll just go through it really quickly again, but feel free to please ask questions if you didn't grab something. You can hit this Create Resource button from the homepage. You can always get to the homepage by clicking WhyLabs here. You can also always get to that data and model management page by opening up the hamburger menu, going to settings, going to model and dataset management. And then we're here. We would hit type in a new model here, except for I already am at my max models. If you need to delete a model, you can hit edit. Actually, I can delete this one for now. Delete that. And then I would type in here, and then I get my model ID. That's what we want to copy over to our notebook in that model ID placeholder section. From the same page, we can go to access tokens and then create a new API key here. We'll get that in that blue box. And then you also want to get that org ID and copy that over as well. Was anyone able to get all their API keys? I know it's kind of a lot to go through, like getting the OpenAI one, all the other ones, if you didn't already have the account. I'll pause again for a second to get a drink of water, but also let people grab those keys if they want to get them. Somebody said it worked. Awesome. Glad you were able to follow along. And yeah, I don't know. I'm always curious, like how many people watching, if you already have an OpenAI account. I'm guessing quite a few people, if you've been experimenting around with LLMs, you probably already have OpenAI API account. Hopefully you do. All right, so moving on, let's go ahead and create a function. We're going to call it summarize text. Now it's going to take a user prompt. So this is going to be the text that we want to summarize. And it's also going to take a system prompt. By default, it's an optional variable that we can, or parameter that we can pass through. So by default, it's none, but then we can pass it in. And these are going to be specific instructions to tell the LLM what to do, basically with the user prompt. And if you haven't used the OpenAI API yet, this is kind of what it looks like if you're using GPT 3.5 Turbo. There's a couple different models you could be using from OpenAI. So for example, GPT-4, if you have access to it. And then also they have some other completion model endpoints you can use. But I've actually found that just the GPT kind of chat 3.5 does a pretty good job, if not better than the other endpoints besides 4. And then you just give it a specific user prompt or system prompt, and that this is going to affect how the model behaves. And then the user prompt is what we're going to be doing that behavior on. So this will be the text that we're going to be summarizing. And then we're going to create a dictionary here called prompt and response. And we're going to return both the prompt and the response out of the function when we call it. And this makes it really easy for us to log the data with LangKit, like we saw an example of in the slides. But also, if I wasn't even using LangKit, maybe I want to store the prompt and response somewhere, so I could return this out and actually save that JSON or something to an S3 bucket. Again, it might depend on how your app is set up, but you might want to be saving these prompts and responses as key value pairs over time, so you can go back and look at your data or train a new model with this data, etc. So let's go ahead and test this out now. Actually, I need to run that code cell. Let's test it out. We're going to pass in these instructions. So I encourage you right now to play around with this. So right now you can see I say summarize this text, use only 3 bullet points, explain like I'm 5 wordings. You could adjust this to, wording. So, it's going to summarize whatever I pass in. Hopefully it's going to put in 3 bullet points, and then it's going to try to kind of explain like I'm 5. So hopefully use language that most people could understand what's going on here. Now I'm passing in this really long string here, which in this case, this is the abstraction for the attention is all you need paper, which is what transformers are built on, which most GPT models are. But again, I encourage you, one, play around with these instructions. And then also, if you want to get different data and just paste it into this string instead. So again, a fun thing is you can maybe get your favorite movie plot or something like that, paste it in and see how it summarizes it. So let's run this. And then here, we're going to pass in the test prompt and the instructions that we defined above. And then we're just going to print the response that came out. So remember, we're returning the prompt and response as a dictionary. So we're just going to print out the response that came in, so we won't see this big chunk of text again. So we're passing in this big chunk of text, and then it came out and said, the transformer is a new type of network architecture for sequence transduction models. It uses attention mechanisms instead of recurrent or convolutional neural networks, which again, maybe I could improve this as like, it's super short, so maybe it can't do a better job explaining like M5. These are still a lot of pretty complex words. If I didn't know what a CNN was, I might be lost here. The transformer model performs better, is more parallelizable, and requires less training time than existing models on machine translation tests. So this did a pretty good job of summarizing it into 3 bullet points. What if we said like 4 bullet points? So again, I encourage you to mess around with this prompt. This is what's adjusting our behavior of our LM. So let's see what it does with 4. Should give us a 4th bullet point, and it does. It's kind of giving us more information there. We could, again, what is something fun that you think would be good to adjust how this is behaving? Someone says, does WhyLabs work with open source LLM models? Yep, it should work with basically any large language model. All you're doing is getting the prompts and responses. Today we're showing OpenAI, but we've done a lot of workshops and have a lot of material on Hugging Face models as well. In fact, if you scroll to the end of this notebook, there's a link to an example for doing this with Hugging Face. But as long as you get prompts and responses in a dictionary or a data frame format, you can do all the stuff that we're seeing here today. Someone said, I am not good with my current OpenAI key. You might need to go get another one. Maybe you deleted your OpenAI key before. Yeah, and you could also, again, Google different models to use here. The 3.5 Turbo is great for a lot of use cases, and it's so cheap. I forget the exact price, but it's like, fractions of a penny for each call here. So if anyone has a fun idea of what we could ask this to do, let me know in the chat. They said you exceeded your current quota. Interesting. Maybe you have a I know you can set like a max spend on your OpenAI account. Maybe you've exceeded that, or maybe you had I don't know if you had free tokens before, or like a free amount that you could use. I know I used to, like a long time ago. It gave me like $20 or something. Maybe you need to add in more credits. All right, so let's play around with this just a tiny bit more. Let's say, I don't know, make it. Actually, let's look at metrics and then play around with this more. So, all right, I'll leave this as. So we can kind of see what's going on. You can adjust that prompt above. This is going to drastically change what is coming out of your large language model. If you want to do summarization, probably always have something in here like summarize this text, or, we are going to be summarizing this text. Here's more specific instructions. So this is cool. Let's look at some metrics we could potentially use to evaluate what's coming out of here. And we're going to be using LangKit here. So some metrics that are important. Again, let me know what you think. There could be a whole bunch. There's not one silver bullet for any specific LLM task, that I know of yet. Definitely a lot of stuff we're working on is finding better metrics for that, for all these different tasks. But some of the out-of-the-box metrics, like we saw, we had like word length or sentence length, different readability scores, and then you can add custom metrics, and I'll link to some ones you might want to look at specifically for summarization cases. Like BERT score is a popular one where, again, we have a blog post about it, but you can kind of compare like how relevant is the prompt versus response. So even though we lost a lot of text in there, is it still basically saying the same thing? There are some really interesting metrics that you can use, that you could bring in as a custom metric and get really, really potentially valuable feedback for your LLM models. But let's look at these out of the box ones first. So we're going to import LLM metrics from LangKit and WhyLogs as Y. We're going to initialize a language metric schema here. The first time we run this, it can take a second to run. I think I might have already run this before, or it might have run when we imported it the first time. But it might take a few seconds as it's initializing some models behind the scenes. And then here, let's go ahead and run this, and I'll describe what's happening. All right, so now we have this data frame here. I'm going to scroll up. What we're doing here is creating a variable called language metrics or lang metrics. We're calling it y.log. We're passing in the summary, which is our whole dictionary here that had the prompt and response. And we're passing in schema, which is our language metric schema, which is going to contain those out-of-the-box metrics by default. But again, you could add custom metrics, initialize the schema again, and then have things like BERT score, et cetera, that you want to add that aren't out of the box in LangKit. And then we're going to look at this in a view format and look at that view format in pandas. So now we have this data frame in our notebook, and we can kind of inspect what's going on. We have, I think it's something like 15 metrics for each prompt and response, and then also one on prompt and response relevancy. So we can see here we have the first one is prompt, and then let's just look at this real quick as prompt aggregate reading level. We can see cardinality estimate is 1 because we only logged one thing right now. But if we logged a whole bunch of prompts, we'd have a cardinality estimate, which is basically how many variations we've had. Most of your interactions, might be different, probably would be different in real world use cases. So cardinality would go up. Then we can scroll over and we can see our readability score for that specific metric that we put in is 14. I think this is out of 100. I'd have to double check. There's a whole bunch of metrics for me to keep track of here. And this is probably saying like it's not as readable because we had a lot of complex words that we came in from our abstraction. And we can see that the max, the mean, the median, the min, they're all the same number here. Again, because we just logged one version of a prompt and response. As we log more together, we'd have a different distribution of these where, the max would be the highest number that was in that batch. The min would be the lowest number. So these numbers are all going to look the same right now in max, mean, etc. Just because we have one that we're logging right now. But we'll see what this looks like as we log more over time here in a second. And we can also see we have a readability index, character count. Again, that might be good for summarization. Difficult words. Again, it depends on our application. So maybe, we don't care if it's very readable. We expect our audience to be academic in the field, whatever they're summarizing. And maybe that's not really something we want to pay attention to, but potentially in your application, it could be. Or maybe the character count is. So maybe you always want it to be like 150 characters. And if it went out of bounds of that, you could set an alert or just kind of observe this over time, which again, we'll see here in a second. Flesh reading ease, so saying kind of how easy is the text to read coming out of, in this case, we're looking at prompts, but we also have all these metrics on responses. So you'll see prompt dot this thing. If you scroll down, you'll see response dot this metric. And in this case, we're probably going to be observing the response metrics if we want to evaluate how our model is performing, but also logging all these together, like we'll see here in a minute, over time, gives us a good kind of understanding of how people are also using our LLM. So you might learn that, people are putting in really complex stuff, or people are putting in really simple stuff, or really toxic prompts, or the sentiment's always low. It gives you a really good kind of understanding of how users are using your data, even if that's not really the thing you're specifically optimizing for right now. And then you can also calculate, jailbreak similarity. So are people trying to make your model do something that it shouldn't be doing? Are they trying to extract data out of it? And again, that's more of a security use case, which we will dive more into tomorrow. Before I forget, actually, I will share the link to that. So tomorrow we'll be doing kind of a similar workshop, but with different apps, and we'll actually be talking about some of the top 10 security cases from OWASP. And how we can monitor these metrics for that. So today we're going to be mostly looking at these responses and kind of evaluating our model. But there's a lot you can do for evaluating the prompts coming in and setting things up like guardrails to make sure your model's behaving how it should be behaving. Okay, so we have kind of a quick way of seeing our metrics. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit more exciting. We've set up our API keys so we can actually write these metrics to WhyLabs and more easily visualize them. So let's import Gradio as GR. All right. I think we might have done that before, but we'll import it again. And then let's create another little function here. And again, I encourage you to mess around with this text. It will actually be able to see what this looks like over time as we change it, because we're going to write a time series view in WhyLabs where we can see these changes over time. What we're doing is taking in the message just like before, days to subtract. So you can backfill data in WhyLabs, and there's going to be a little dragging bar that you're able to drag around to subtract date. So 0 is going to be writing today, and then you can go back 6 days. So you could write like a week ago and then set up kind of what these things look like over a week. We're getting our prompt and response from our summarize text function. We're going to profile it with ylogs like we've seen before. And then the only thing different we're doing is calling this telemetry agent from WhyLabs. And then that's going to set the profile date to a different timestamp if we change it. So by default, when we write it to WhyLabs, it's the date and time that we write it, but we can overwrite that date time, which is what we're doing here if we decide to kind of backfill our data. And then we're going to write that profile up to WhyLabs. And then we're also going to print out the response in Gradio. So run this. And then this is actually the little Gradio app piece where we're creating an interface. And actually, if you just run this, you'll kind of see what all that is doing. Let me know if this works for you too. So again, Gradio inside Colab could be a little finicky, but it seems like it's been doing pretty good lately. And it's my first time really relying on it for a workshop. So if somebody in the chat wants to let me know that this worked on their end too, that would be great. If not, like I mentioned, I kind of have a backup code cell here, which isn't quite as cool looking, but it kind of does the same stuff on the back end here. But we can see that we have this little message window that we can put in text. And then we have this kind of drag thing here. And I'm going to copy this text below. So it's the same text that we had before. But again, I encourage you to go grab your own text and potentially mess around with this prompt where we're telling our model what to do. So the current prompt is summarize this text, use only 3 bullet points, short sentences, explain like I'm 5 wording, and make easy to read for anyone. So let's go ahead and paste this in. And I'm going to drag this to 6 days. So what this is going to do is basically write data a week ago. So if I hit into WhyLabs, so you'll see what this looks like in a minute. I'm going to hit submit. And if all goes well, we'll get a response from our OpenAI model. Sometimes OpenAI can take a little bit to get a response back from too as well. Like I think that took 4 seconds, which isn't too bad, but sometimes I've had it take a little bit longer. So here we have our output now. And it's actually really cool. You've kind of built almost a whole little app at this point where you actually have an interface to put in text and then you get a response back here. That's why Gradio is really cool. And Russ said it worked. Awesome. Thank you for letting me know. All right, so we got a response back. Let's actually go ahead and just run this again on the same day. Again, you could do a different day if you want. I'm just going to show an example on my end here. And I definitely encourage you, again, to get your own text to summarize and see what's going on and mess with that prompt. So we ran it twice now on the same day. Let's do one more time. And we'll see the responses are actually a little bit different every single time, right? At least they should be. Usually they are. So I'm going to go to WhyLabs now. We've already set up our API key, so it's writing data to it. We have our sum app. This is the one I just made. I'm going to click into it. We have a little dashboard, summary dashboard here. This gets more interesting the more data that gets uploaded. But you can see we have like 33 metrics that we're tracking. You'll get some information around like if there's potential security issues or daily volume coming in. Then we have a dashboard tab here. This is kind of segmented by security metrics and performance metrics. Again, we'll focus more on this if you come to the workshop tomorrow, but we can already see that there's some data coming in here for prompt sentiment. Monitor manager, we'll come back to this later, but we can easily set up a monitor to trigger when our data fluctuates a lot or goes over a certain threshold, whatever we can define, what our monitor is. If we go to the Insight Explorer tab, we are now kind of getting some insights that's gained from our profile that's uploaded. If that isn't showing, click this little show insight button, and then it should show up here. So it's saying the prompt sentiment is a score of 97, indicating overall positive sentiment. And our reading score is 55 of 100. So this might be a little difficult to read. When we were looking at the response, it was talking about convolutional neural networks, etc., kind of these complex words and stuff. That's probably contributing to what could be a low score. Again, maybe not. Maybe 55 is actually pretty good for our use case. Like if we're expecting people to be technical, maybe that's a totally fine reading score. But by default, it's saying that could be difficult for people to understand. And it's saying the response is a sentiment of 67. So again, still overall positive. So this will kind of look at all those metrics that we saw before, those 33 metrics coming in. And if any of those scores look like they're really high or really low when they shouldn't be, or potentially, it'll kind of show you some insights here, which is really cool. A quick way to kind of understand what is happening. We've only passed in 2 prompts here and 2 responses. So the more data you add, the more things will show up here. This is how I found when my model had the phone number that I wasn't expecting, because it said there was a pattern found, a phone number came out. And I was like, what? And then I went back and looked at my prompt and responses because I saved them. and was able to see that it did provide a phone number, which was wild to me. So let's go over to this last tab, Telemetry Explorer. This is where we can see all of our metrics that we saw in that data frame. But if we click into one, I'm going to go ahead and click into this Flesh Reading Ease. We can see this isn't super exciting yet. It'll look cooler here when we upload more data on different days. We can see that now our data is uploaded on this day, the 19th, so about a week ago, because I overwrote 6 days. And we can see we have the min, the max, the median for our reading score here, as well as some quantiles. And so you can kind of see that yellow upper and lower bound, and then the median is right there. And that's because we wrote this 3 times, and the response came back slightly different every time. So there's actually 3 different values in here. The reading score is really high for one and a little bit lower for sure on one of the other ones. And so that would be maybe something we'd want to fix in our prompt to always make sure the reading score is going to be super high. So you could actually kind of use this almost as, like, if this was the metric you wanted to really optimize for, you can almost use it as a fitting function for all your prompts, and then monitor those prompts over time and change your system prompt to make it, in this case, like more readable. Or you might be looking at like character count. You always want it to be shorter or something like that. So now we're gaining some insight about how our model is behaving. Let's go back here. And what I'm going to do is I'll write a couple. Maybe I'll do the 3 again just for a few more days here. So I'm going to drag that bar to 5. So now it's going to overwrite or write data 5 days ago here. And you can also just backfill this data. Like if you had a whole bunch of data from production, you want to kind of go ahead and put in WhyLabs, you could loop through and just subtract days on it and be a little bit easier than running this every time and like dragging this bar. But I think this is more fun and a little bit more interactive potentially. Hopefully somebody is like taking their own data, like a movie summarization again. I think it's a fun one, and seeing what the model says. So again, I'll just do it 3 times for 5. And if I go back to WhyLabs, I'll refresh here. And now we have the next day. So we're starting to get this like data filled in over time, right? So we're kind of simulating our model being in production for 7 days right now. So again, you could go drag this bar, and I'm just going to do this really quickly. So let's do a couple more days here. Get a full little time series view. And what I'm going to do next is change that prompt and kind of see how it affects these metrics over time. So again, you could go ahead and go up and change this instructions, which is, what's causing our model to behave the certain way right now, and see how it's affecting your metrics. Or paste a new summarization or text that you want to summarize. So right now I'm just kind of repeating the same text just to make it kind of quick for this workshop. But you go through, summarize a whole bunch of different movies, summarize a whole bunch of different papers, see what the model's doing. Let me do this one more day here, and then we'll go look at it in WhyLabs again. Also, any questions so far? Does this seem interesting, like something you'd want to integrate in with a model that either, in your evaluation period or a model in production? So I'll refresh WhyLabs again, and we can see that it's kind of interesting. We didn't change our prompt here, but we can already see kind of there's quite a variation of the response readability score. Again, maybe this isn't the thing we actually want to optimize for our app, but it could be one of those metrics, or this could be, again, a custom metric too. So if you wanted to bring in any other metric like blue or rouge, BERT score, you could be monitoring them over time here and kind of figuring out how your model's behaving. So it's kind of interesting, right? Like we didn't change our system prompt here at all. We're getting some fluctuation for sure in just like the readability score that's coming out of it. And that's kind of to be expected a little bit, where, LLMs are always kind of making up a response. And there's going to be fluctuation because it's not going to be the same thing over time. We do one more here, kind of see if it goes up again in this last data point. And does anyone have an app they're working on? And we could potentially talk about maybe metrics for it as well. But again, you can see upper, lower bounds for these. And then let's go in back to our model here real quick. I'm going to hit stop. This is going to stop the Gradio app. And let's change this prompt. What do you think would be something that would like drastically change it, just so we can kind of see what it would look like? Again, it's okay if for this example it could be contrived, but you're probably going to be more kind of slightly tweaking these prompts and making sure that it's making your app better over time. In this case, I'll say summarize this text, and let's see. Let's summarize this text. Use 10 sentences. That'll probably definitely change the amount of text that's going to be coming in. Or sorry, 10 bullet points. That's what I meant to say. And I'll say robust sentences. Again, I'm just trying to make this a little bit different so we can see what these metrics would look like. And I'll say I'll make it more complex sounding. Again, usually you probably wouldn't be trying to make your thing worse here. You'd be improving it over time, but just kind of for this example, let's see what happens when we tell it to summarize the text, use 10 bullet points, robust sentences, and make it more complex sounding. So again, I'll copy over the same text though, put it in, and I'll just go ahead and say day 0 here, which would be today's date. Actually, I'll do, I think 1. I don't think I wrote it on that one yet. So keep the time series going here. I'll hit submit, and let's see what gets returned. Somebody asked, can you give general tips to prevent hallucinations? We actually just had a really good blog post on this that I'll share from one of our data scientists. And I would recommend checking this out. Has some really good tips of what you might want to be looking for, and like how to kind of monitor some hallucinations and mitigate them. So here's BERT score, one of the ones I was mentioning earlier, where you could kind of see, is the text still similar enough? Especially, it's a really good one, I think, from what I've seen for summarization use cases. It seems to be a popular one people are using. Yeah, there's quite a bit in here you can check out. It's a really good blog post to kind of go deeper into preventing hallucinations. All right, so going back to our weird prompt that we did, or system prompt, where now it's 10 bullet points. This should be much harder to read, etc. Let's kind of see how this affected our metrics over time. So go back to WhyLabs, a refresh, see what a readability score is. Definitely not very high there. I'm actually going to go ahead and run this a few times so we get the upper and lower bounds as well as the median. So I'll do it 3 times. Is anyone trying this with any other fun kind of data you're putting in, whether it's movie recommendations, like I said, or something else, other paper summarizations? Meeting notes, potentially? So now refresh here. I'll look at our data again. So we can see that definitely, the reading, in this case, that flash reading score value is, pretty consistently low now, whereas before at least had, some higher bounds, and the median was quite a bit higher for most of these. We could also look at what would be a good one, probably response sentence count. It's probably going to go way up there at the end, right? This is pretty consistent. It was always a 3 bullet points. We said short sentences. We didn't say a specific amount, but we can see pretty consistent. And then this last day, it drastically changed. So again, that could come from, potentially in a real world use case, your users interacting with your app a different way as well. So you could be looking for correlations between this and someone trying to like jailbreak your app, even if if you're always like, oh, it's always going to give 3 sentences back, and someone found a way to give it more, etc. Or maybe you changed your system prompt trying to make it better, and you didn't really realize that you got rid of the part that always made it short, and that was a big feature of your app, and now this kind of drastically changed. So you can look at this chart and kind of understand behavior of what's going on in your model, and then from the responses and the prompts. If you don't want to eyeball these charts all the time, this might not work super well on all these features today because we just kind of put in a couple examples here. But you can set up a monitor as well. So what is this on sentence count? We could set up a monitor There's some presets here that you could click on. I'm going to go ahead and hit new custom monitor. I'm going to use the UI builder. You can also go in the JSON configuration. JSON configuration has a lot of flexibility. So if you can kind of think of a metric that you have in here and any way to monitor, you could probably set it up in the JSON configuration if the UI builder doesn't have the thing you're looking for. In this case, let's just look at data drift. We're going to say non-discrete values. So this is like more of a rolling number, like 0 to 31, etc. We're going to go ahead and apply this to all columns. Again, for our data set that we prompts and responses that we saw today, this is probably going to be really noisy alerts for all of those columns, but you can manually select one. So if we wanted to look at just character count or something, we could go ahead and do that. I'll make this a little bit more sensitive. So it's only going to trigger alert if there's a pretty big amount of data drift. And we have different drift algorithms you can use. Hellinger distance is pretty good for most categorical and non-discrete values. So if you don't know the specific one you need, recommend just sticking with that. Let's hit next. We're going to use a 7-day rolling window. So it's going to be looking at data in the 7 days. And if any of those drastically change, hopefully trigger an alert for us here. We can also compare to a reference profile. This is really good if you have a training data set and you want to kind of compare new data coming in and maybe compare it to your training data set or a set of golden prompts and responses. And if it goes way off the rails there, send an alert, or you can use a specific date range to compare against. So I'll hit next. You can set the alert severity. This is just for you so you know if it's like a high alert or a low alert, depending which metric you're setting this up on. You can set different actions to email you, Slack a channel, or send a message in a Slack channel, or you can set up an integration with PagerDuty to tie back to your MLOps pipeline and actually do some sort of workflow action. So we'll go ahead and hit save here. Let's go back to the Telemetry Explorer. And let's look specifically at the sentence count again. Where was that? Oh, it's the last one. And let's see what this alert might look like. Again, it's going to be noisy, I think, on a lot of our other data. But on this, we can specifically see sentence count was pretty consistent for those last 5 days or 6 days. And then on this last day here, it went way up. So we actually have an alert that gets triggered. And now we, wouldn't have to worry about monitoring this like every day, checking this chart. We can actually just have these alerts happen when one of the things we're looking for activates. Someone said their version broke. Does that mean something in the notebook, potentially? Maybe Gradio. Or a couple times I've had it where like OpenAI API call like just kind of hung up on me and never returned something. I'm not sure if that's what happened to you. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that cell. We saw how we could build a summarization app. Again, you can mess around. I definitely encourage you messing around with the instructions going into it. If you want to do something that's not a summarization app, you could actually take what we have today, change this instruction. You could say like translate this text or whatever to a different language, and then run this Gradio app, and it would do it as well. So it's a kind of a hopefully cool little template for you to get started building different apps with LLMs and OpenAI. This code cell, again, if you're coming back on or watching this recording and Gradio for some reason is failing, you could come back and run this code cell, and it'll actually, you don't have to do this right now, but it'll just give you a little text box like this. You can copy in the text you want to summarize. And then this is the days. So you could say 0, that would write up today. And then that'll do the same thing above. Again, not as cool, not in an interface like we had with the Gradio app. I think it's taking a second there with OpenAI again. We got our result printed out. So again, not nearly as kind of fun, in my opinion, as this little Gradio app that we have going on. All right, so that's kind of it for the material that we had planned today. But there's resources here for you to keep learning. And again, I'll ask the question, what type of large language model application would you want to see a workshop on next? You could be pretty specific or maybe more vague, like if you just want to see how you would build a chatbot with OpenAI and monitor it, or you could be more specific on the type of model, like if you want to look at a Hugging Face model or Google's Palm, or is it a chatbot for a specific application, like I don't know. For some reason, the one that always comes to mind is like a tax chatbot. I don't know why I keep thinking of that. But here are some great links for you to continue learning. Also, if you want to get a certification for this workshop, fill out this form here. And the hallucination blog post, definitely recommend checking this out. I already shared it earlier, but I'm going to share it again. And adding custom metrics, this is a pretty common use case. Again, we have all those out-of-the-box metrics, which are a great starting point, but you might have other metrics you want to bring in, like BERT score, etc. Another good example for a custom metric actually might be like we were talking about doing a translation app. So if you were saying, hey, translate this word to Korean, you could actually do like a language detection model and make sure that the response is in the language you were expecting. That might be a really good metric for monitoring a translation application. And someone asked about using this outside of OpenAI. So here is an example with Hugging Face that I'll share as well. So again, you can use LangKit and WhyLabs basically with any model here. As long as you get the prompt and response, you can extract metrics. And we didn't talk about it today. Tomorrow we will, but you can use these different metrics also locally in your environment. So now you have this, you can put this in like a dictionary format and run evaluation checks on it. So you use that as a guardrail saying, again, we get this jailbreak similarity score. If that reaches a certain level, we might count that as a jailbreak and not return the response from our model back to the user. Or maybe not even pass the prompt into our model. Usually, I think what I've seen most of the time is they will pass that prompt into the model, but then make sure that that response does not go to the user, so they can see how the model behaved. So I said, how does the public URL work when deploying to spaces? Someone also said, should the certification email to us? Yeah, so fill out the form, and then you'll get an email this week or next week. Right now, we manually create them, so it can take a little bit of time. So it'll be a few days or probably early next week that you'll get it. So the public URL, I assume you're talking about the Gradio space here. I think when this is running, I know that at least me, as I'm authorized, I actually don't know if I share this. If people can access it from anywhere, you might be able to. But I think this is a feature of kind of Gradio where they make it really easy to make these little apps. And Hugging Face maintains Gradio now. So you'll see a lot of apps on Hugging Face basically just built in a Gradio interface. And Hugging Face, if you don't know, they make like the transformer library, but they also have a site where you can host models and datasets on, and you can host basically models in this Gradio interface and then get an actual public URL that will stay live over there. This one, Colab has like pretty stringent runtimes. So if you're on the free tier, I forget what it is, but it'll probably cut off. Even if you can share this, I'm actually not sure. I'm guessing you can share it out to other people, but you might have to be authorized with your Google account. But it wouldn't be something you want to be running here all the time and then rely on that link being live to share to people. Like Colab is really not made for that. It's just made for kind of temporary interactive computing, and they probably wouldn't like it. And it'll probably cut off, in an hour or something like that if you're using the free tier. Any other questions or feedback? Again, like, does this seem pretty interesting? Was this fun to go build a summarization app and look at some metrics that you could use to potentially improve it over time, or how to kind of monitor it? And if you have the notebook, again, all these links are accessible later as well. So it was interesting and fun. That's what I aim for. So great to hear that. Hopefully it's fun. You hopefully also learn some new stuff. Raymond said yes. Awesome. Well, if there's no other pressing questions on LangKit or WhyLabs, I am going to wrap up the stream, and hopefully I will talk to some of you later. Again, I don't think I have the link down here, but I'll share the link to the Slack chat again. If you want to ask questions in there later, that's going to be a good place to do it. There's other people in there besides me as well. And if you want to do an introduction there, I'll say hello there as well. All right, I'm going to wrap up the stream. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you so much for everyone who asked really good questions or even just told me, yes, the thing worked when I asked. It means a lot to me when I'm presenting to get a little bit of feedback from people. So thank you so much, and I will talk to you later. If you have any questions about anything we talked about, connect with me on LinkedIn or Slack, and I'll do my best to answer them. Have a good day, everyone.